Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts and in partnership with Vertical Valor Magazine. In this two-part series, I sit down with members of the Maryland State Police at the ECHO 2024 conference in Richmond, Virginia. Thank you to the Virginia State Police for allowing us to record this episode inside their hangar. During the conversation, we discussed the importance of networking and education in public safety. We discussed their personal journeys into aviation and law enforcement. Our guests share insights on their roles as trooper paramedics, the challenges of maintaining proficiency in a large unit, and the unique considerations involved in transporting and caring for canines. The discussion highlights the significance of collaboration among agencies during emergencies and the value of training and experience in the field. This conversation explores the various aspects of public safety aviation, focusing on canine transportation missions, recruitment and retention challenges, paramedic training, multi-agency responses, and DUI enforcement experiences. Our guests share insights from their military backgrounds and discuss the complexities of operations involving the Coast Guard and other agencies. Thank you to our sponsors, Precision Aviation Group, Wysong Enterprises, and Robinson Helicopter Company.
Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hangar Z podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Join your host, Jon Gray, Jeff Ratkovich, and Jack Shanley.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like you're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, through the shotgun, through something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
4 on the stop. You're in custody.
Good advising code 4 on the stop.
Hey, welcome to Hangar Z podcast. I'm your host, Jon Gray, at ECHO 2024 in Richmond, Virginia. And I do have to say, Virginia, of all the states I've been to, is one of my favorite states. It's the most beautiful, picturesque place that I've driven through. Remember going to D.C. and driving down from D.C. en route to go see my dad in South Carolina. We drove through the Shenandoah Valley, going to Tennessee, and I'm like, where the heck are we? This place is awesome. So it's cool to come back to Virginia, and we're at the Virginia State Police headquarters, and it's kind of funny that we're not talking to Virginia State Police. We're talking to the Maryland State Police. Honored to have you guys on the podcast. Thanks for offering to come in and talk to me at this event. Virginia State Police hosted a fly-in at their place. It was called the Fleet Fly-in. It was really cool. I think there was, 10 or 12 different agencies that showed up, something like that.
Yeah.
130 people, I think, is what they said as far as attendance goes. And there was a mixture of fixed-wing and helicopters that showed up. Do you guys know how many aircraft showed up for this?
I think it was
probably about 6.
Yeah, I was going to say like 6 or 7.
I know the numbers were supposed to be higher, but of course, whenever you plan something like this, weather comes in.
Well, yeah, and the weather, and then North Carolina sounds like is keeping some people occupied.
Yeah. So we're on the heels of Hurricane Helen or Helene, I guess.
Helene?
However you say it. As part of my travels up here, I went to South Carolina to visit my dad. So the inverse of what we were just talking about, and got to experience the hurricane there in South Carolina. It was wild.
Yeah.
I live in Southern California, and we're used to winds from the Santa Ana winds, and those winds are gusty. These sustained winds were something I've never experienced. Is that something you guys deal with from time to time yourselves?
Yeah, I mean, we get some storms up in Maryland. Like we get like nor'easters in the winter sometimes. I don't know, a lot of your big afternoon thunderstorms, but too crazy.
Hurricane
that
comes up the bay.
Yeah, it's wild. The sound of the wind outside was something I again hadn't experienced. It sounded like a freight train to me, and then it actually knocked a tree into the house and damaged my dad's house. So anyways, it's been an experience, but I was happy to get here, and I feel bad for the poor folks that are affected by this. There's so much damage, the widespread power outages, the flooding, the destruction from this. So I was actually quite surprised by it. I knew coming up here or about to come out here that there was some forecasted weather, a hurricane, but I think when I first saw it, it was a tropical storm.
Yeah.
It hadn't developed into a hurricane yet, and they were predicting maybe it was going to be a Category 3. And for me, I'm like, I'm going to be in South Carolina. That doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Well, it sure did. So,
right.
Anyways, again, happy to be here with you guys. Happy to be at ECHO. I really enjoy these conferences. You talk about networking and education and all the things that go with these kind of events. I think they're really important
again, going back to a natural disaster, the networking that goes into these things, the people you meet and the relationships that you build, I think those relationships come to bear in those types of incidents, right? You know who you can depend on, what resources they have, and then some of the training you're receiving, like SR3 today, did a nice presentation, comes in key. So love these types of events. Have you guys been to Echo before?
I haven't, no.
Just one time. I was able to go last year to San Diego and had a
not a bad place, huh?
Not a bad place. Had a very similar experience. It was a lot of good interaction and great education.
Yeah, the networking part of it and the education is just, it's hard to replicate that.
Yeah.
You know, I like local fly-ins a lot. Local fly-ins are great for a million reasons, but it's really cool to get a perspective from somebody who flies maybe the same mission but an entirely different geographic region than you, to learn from the things they're doing differently than you, which I think is pretty neat. So the national ones I like as well. I want to introduce you guys. We talked about the agency you're from. Can you guys just kind of go around the room, introduce yourself? Kurt, we'll start with you. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into public safety, and then also what your current assignment is and what you're doing?
Sure. My name's Kurt Tucker. I'm one of the instructor pilots for the state police, Aviation Command. I'm one of the few people in our organization that's actually from Maryland. So I'm a lifelong Marylander. Grew up watching different trooper aircraft kind of fly around, pick up accident victims, and something that always was an interest. I got into aviation shortly after high school, working at a little general aviation airport, and then after college, ended up going in the Army as a helicopter pilot.
Going back to the job at the airport, what'd you do, and were you doing that to be around aviation to get yourself in, or?
Yeah, my dad was an air crew member in the Army Air Corps, and then switched over to the Air Force, and then he got out. So it had an aviation. He was an aerial photographer, so had always a lot of plane pictures and things like that. We went to air shows as a kid and things like that. So always had a kind of an interest in doing it. And it was both an opportunity and a mechanism to get closer to aviation. So family run business. If you talked about local fly-ins. I mean, the atmosphere around a mom and pop airport, just the people you meet and the stories and lies that they tell are great.
It's like fishing a little bit, right?
Exactly. It's like a bar without the alcohol a lot of times. So did that for a long time. Did everything from dumping trash, pumping gas, bumming airplane rides to eventually becoming a flight instructor. Then ended up getting into the aviation command with the state police in 2017 with bringing my helicopter background with the Army, and I've been there. I started out as a line pilot over in Eastern Shore, Maryland, and then last couple of years got promoted to instructor pilot. So been doing that.
Going back to your Army experience, what did you do in the Army as far as flying goes?
So I've been in the reserve the entire time, with the exception of active duty activations. But I'm a CH-47 Chinook pilot.
Okay.
Actually, not too far from where we are now, down in Newport News, Virginia.
Okay.
So I've been down there for a long time.
So of all the aircraft you've had an opportunity to fly, including the Kodiak you just went up in, what would you say your favorite airframe is?
Well, I like sometimes the simplicity of airplanes. It's very little airplanes. It's very easy to just walk up to the airport that you know and already are established as a customer, and then just get an airplane and go fly with not a whole lot of questions asked. Kind of like getting a rental car and going. I like helicopters a lot. The Army mission is really fun, but the Army can make things that are fun not much fun. That everybody that's an Army pilot will say flying in the aircraft is the fun part most of the time. It's all of the other stuff, and that's fill in the blank of any military job, or is it's all the other stuff associated with that job. So.
Sure.
So it's tough. It's airplanes versus helicopters. There's things I like about each of them.
Yeah. Well, talking about a beautiful state, you grew up in a beautiful state and have an opportunity to fly in a beautiful state. I'm jealous. It's almost fall. The fall leaves are coming. Are you guys starting to see that change now?
Yeah.
A little bit, yeah, definitely. I'm closer to the Chesapeake Bay, so I'm almost dead center of the state with aligned with a couple of our different locations. So starting to see a little bit coming.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again for coming and hanging out and talking about
glad
your
to be
career and
here.
stuff.
Yeah.
This is cool. So, you're the most junior of the crew.
I am, yeah. No, I came into the unit just last year.
It'd be cool to hear your story, your most recent rise through the ranks of the state police and how you got to where you're at. But going back to where you grew up and how you got here, can you walk us through that?
Yeah, most definitely. So thanks for having us on.
Yeah.
Really happy to be here. My name's Andrew Hennigan. I'm a trooper paramedic with Maryland State Police Aviation Command. I was born up originally in New England area, like Connecticut, lived in Vermont for a few years. Then we moved down to Virginia in the early 2000s and grew up there. So coming back for this conference to Virginia has been a good time, just especially seeing the VSP and their hangar here, and the air unit has been pretty neat. Worked for a fire department in Central Virginia from roughly 2014 to up to 18. Applied to the state police. I was looking to get into flight medicine, and the ability to be a trooper at the same time was a dream come true.
Did the fire guys give you a hard time when you applied?
We always think that. I think I found more of it the other way around. Police officers and troopers giving the fire guys a hard time. So that's been interesting.
Yeah.
I was in patrol for a few years, and I definitely saw some of the things that the firefighters have an issue with the police officers over. So some of that started to make sense. So yep, came to the state police in 18, and then was in patrol up until 2023. I was able to come into the unit.
Okay.
In January.
So that was a fairly quick move to aviation. Is that a typical move within your department?
Sometimes not.
I guess timing, right?
Yeah, being such a large unit, we do some recruitment of ourselves on our own, is I guess what I mean by that. So we'll go out and try and recruit paramedics to become troopers. And they don't essentially get fast-tracked into the unit, but they may only spend a year to a year and a half in patrol. Going through the academy, I really enjoyed learning the trooper stuff. So that's why I was able to stay out for a couple of years, I guess 4-ish years, and enjoyed my time doing that. And then we also have another subset of people who come to the state police. They become a trooper. They learn about the aviation unit. And then over their time on their own, they'll go out and get their paramedic while working patrol.
You pay for that on your own?
Yes.
Wow.
Yep. Yeah, so a lot of dedication, balancing family life, full-time, court, of course, all the time, and then
Sure.
getting their paramedic, and then bringing them in.
Wow. How long did it take you to get your medic?
So I fortunately was a paramedic when I came to the state police.
Okay.
Which, for anybody listening, I'd probably recommend.
Yeah.
I would think trying to do that while employed would be difficult.
Sure.
So I got it out of high school, a hybrid community college class, and then also like a private organization.
Okay.
I was able to do that about a year.
Okay.
As a total class length.
So for the folks that are working for the state police and then decide they want to go be a medic on top of that, are they able to do that same course in a year's time, or are they having to do a hybrid and take a lot longer?
Yeah, so I did mine in Virginia, and they don't mandate. I believe in Maryland, it's community college is the only place that you can get your paramedic. So doing it with that private program in Virginia, I was able to do it quickly. In Maryland, I believe it's about a 2-year process.
Okay.
So it could be a little bit more difficult.
Yeah. Going back to your youth, was there somebody in your family that kind of encouraged you or motivated you to go into public safety, or is that just something you naturally wanted to do?
Yeah, my dad, he grew up in the volunteer firehouse. So I remember as a kid going to like the lobster bakes or whatever you want to call them. And I was riding home with my mother one day, I believe from school or from somewhere, and we just stopped by the local firehouse and joined, went through volunteer firefighter, and then got my medic, and then got hired. And
That's cool.
I can't imagine working anywhere else.
Yeah.
So
what a cool experience as a kid. You think back to being 17, 18 years old and the responsibility that you had to do some of the things. Like, I think about some 17, 18-year-old kids now, like they don't even have their license,
Yeah.
But here you are literally making life and death decisions. It's pretty impressive,
Yeah, absolutely. I remember the first time I pushed one of the AW139s around with the John Deere tug that we use, and I grew up on a farm, and I was thinking, I got this, and I realized it's the first time I've pushed around something that's $15 to $20 million loaded, and
no pressure.
That's when it all kind of clicked together.
it's funny, they talk about folks that grew up on farms and how that mechanical knowledge that they gain growing up on a farm translates into aviation so well. Have you had a chance to fly very much as in a pilot seat at all?
Not in our program.
Okay. Kurt, for you as an instructor, outside of law enforcement, did you see kids coming through or adults coming through that had that farm experience, and did that translate at all? Did you see anything like that?
Definitely people that have driven, I mean, spend some time operating a machine. Yeah, it definitely helps. Especially you talk about, heavy equipment, guys that can, or people that can, move hands and feet independently of each other. It definitely helps because your brain is thinking in multiple dimensions.
Yeah, I'll never forget how hard it was to learn to each appendage to do something different. I was the one thing I didn't know if I was ever going to get. 20 hours in, I'm like, man, this is really hard. What was your experience?
Thank you to our sponsor, Robinson Helicopter Company, the choice for unrivaled safety and reliability so you can accomplish any mission with confidence. For more than half a century, Robinson has been at the forefront of the helicopter industry. From the R-22 to the R-66 turbine, Robinson makes helicopters accessible so more people can accomplish more missions. Climb higher. For additional information, visit www.robinsonheli.com.
So when I went to Army flight school, I had a lot of airplane time, so there was definitely had a lot of interference of airplane habits. But it was definitely, I think I may have had a little bit of a leg up with some of that aeronautical knowledge, but it was definitely a different animal in a helicopter. And everybody, like you say, people always say, yeah, just give it time, it'll click. And there was no like, oh, I know how to do this. It was, I'm doing it until my brain says, muscle memory, you're doing it.
Yeah, I remember a good friend of mine, he was my instructor, said trust the process. And I'm like, I don't know what that means, but I'm going to trust what you're saying. And I just kept going. And at some point, one bad landing would turn into one good landing. And then it would turn into a string of good landings. And eventually it was okay. And hovering wasn't as hard, but man, it was difficult in the beginning, So I encourage anybody who's going through training to heed that. Just trust the process. It'll work itself out. So anyways, sorry to go on the rebel, but I do think it's interesting, the correlation between heavy equipment operation and the ability to get into an aircraft and kind of make it work. Anyways, welcome to the podcast. Yeah.
Thanks for having me. So my name is Adam Murray. I'm a trooper flight paramedic, but I'm one of our aircrew training instructors. My job, in addition to the normal flight crew duties, is to kind of train the other flight medics in the crew. And then specifically within our training shop, we have 3 or 4 trainers. My job is the primary trainer for law enforcement and search and rescue. My path to the state police was, a little bit winding, right? I started off kind of like Andrew did as a young fire squirrel, running around, right, doing stuff like that. And that was always a passion for me as a little kid. I loved fire trucks and whatnot, and somehow wound up into it. So I grew up in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and then I moved to Durham and worked as a paramedic for like 5 years. So had some time there as the 19-year-old paramedic, and like, why do they let a 19-year-old do that job? Who knows? But it was fun, and it was a good place to work, good place to get a lot of experience. And then wanted to change, and I wanted to do something flight related. So I started looking around the country and came across the Maryland State Police program, and at the time it seemed really cool, right? A chance to do a lot of different things, a lot of scene calls, and a lot of I like the multi-mission between search and rescue and law enforcement and all the stuff like that. So I picked up with the state police in 2016, and then I had a very short time on the road. We always tell people, if you're a paramedic coming in, we're going to know that you're a paramedic and kind of keep an eye on you, and then it's so subject to the needs of the service when you actually get brought into the aviation unit. So in my case, I was transferred in pretty much immediately after field training, and that's not optimal. We've kind of pushed over the past couple of years, particularly now that I've come to training and I have that experience. I go like, look, we really need to keep guys on the road for at least a year. It really you're always gonna be driving that marked car. You're always gonna be a trooper, and so you really have to be comfortable with that side of the job.
Right.
But there's a lot of ways to get that. So, I always did a lot of, like, whenever we were down for weather, I'd go out for patrol and try to, learn as much as I could.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still do a lot of uniformed assignments. Like I work Ravens games and things like that, where I'm
That's cool.
get to go back into that role a little bit, gain a little overtime. Right, doesn't hurt anybody. So no, it's really fun. And then I was in Trooper 7 and Trooper 2 in Southern Maryland for a couple years, and then I came into the training unit. So I've been in the training unit since 2022, I think.
Okay. You've done a lot of work to kind of revitalize some of the training policies and procedures. I'm excited to.
So I think because of my short time on the road, I think I overcompensated by going like, oh man, I have to learn absolutely everything there is to know about law enforcement and search and rescue. And so I've done a bunch of TFL schools. I've gone out to like LAPD to do their school, and done a lot of ride-alongs with our other allied agencies around the state that also do pure law enforcement to really try to get good with that. And so when I came into the unit, I was like, hey, into the training unit, I was like, that's really what I want to focus on and bring to everybody else, is that sort of kind of passion for that. Try to improve our TFO skills just kind of across the board, and then a lot of the search and rescue stuff, and then working on some of the systems upgrades on our aircraft. So that's been a really interesting task. I've learned a whole lot about FAA paperwork and how to actually put a system on an aircraft, and that's that's a daunting task, but it's interesting.
Yeah, I think of the selection process, and typically we talk about the importance of having a TFO that's got a significant amount of time in the road. But I think your guys' program highlights something a little different. I think of a medic, and it's a perishable skill.
Yeah.
How do you encourage a trooper to come in and get experience, but not lose their edge as a medic?
Yeah. That is super hard, and that is kind of the crux. And we do a lot of training. So we're doing quarterly trainings that are very structured. We do adult and pediatric OR rotations where we're actually going in and doing like live intubations and things like that. But I mean, that's one of the things that I think when we sit at these conferences and talk to other operators and we compare ourselves, sometimes you see these little small operators that do this really cool stuff, and you go, well, there's 25 of them, and they do like one mission really, really, really well. And we're a huge unit. We're, close to 200 people with 7 bases across the state. And so you do that, and then you go, well, we all have to be proficient as paramedics. We all have to be proficient as TFOs. We all have to be proficient as hoist operators or hoist rescuers. You get a lot of things, and it just means we're constantly training.
Yeah, it's tough. With an agency, like you said, the size of yours, it's just to have the standard training that's required.
Yeah.
Just to be check the box proficient,
right,
is tough. That's not even talking about like real proficiency.
Yeah.
And how you get that.
And it's not. I mean, it's these guys. They're paramedics, but they're not seeing the easy stuff.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's not just being a paramedic, but being a paramedic who's proficient at the nasty stuff.
Right.
Because we don't get called for the stub toe or
right.
the strep throat or whatever. We're getting called for these guys who are working their butt off.
What would you say your highest volume call type is? Is it a vehicle accident response, or what are you guys typically going to?
Yeah, I think MVCs are probably the most common. I think the top 5 for us would be like MVCs, falls, shooting, stabbings, your like motorcycle or like, and then coming back to farms, like your machinery accidents, stuff like that.
Also, to throw in another category, some specialty stuff.
Yeah.
Like out west or down south, patients that have like severe seizure issues or any type of like heart assist devices. That's another kind of category of non-trauma patients that will fly back to a specialty center, and sometimes that specialty center is out of state.
Yeah.
So you guys, Baltimore falls within the state of Maryland. Yep. Can you talk about your guys' integration with Baltimore and how some of the crime fighting efforts and crime there impacts your guys' call for service and what that looks like?
We don't get a whole lot out of Baltimore. So Baltimore County and Baltimore City both have their own native air units, and they're very good. They're very professional. We work with them all the time. But so because of that, like we don't get a whole lot there. Now we do. We're kind of the only one in the state that's really 24/7, 365. But yeah, we'll go up to Baltimore and like fill in, like if they're out of service for a couple hours or something like that. Like we'll definitely come in and cover. But we really kind of focus on the I mean, we can get called anywhere, but most of our work is on the periphery of the state.
Okay.
Because even with our medevac missions, the only patients that we're really getting out of, like I can't think of the last time we went to actual Baltimore City, because they would have to be trapped for a really long time or something like that for it to make sense to use a medevac in that case. So yeah, I mean, we do a lot of going out to anywhere and then bringing it back.
Okay.
And on the law enforcement side, you're bringing into the trauma centers aircraft from all different 7 sections. So our Baltimore section knows the area more intimately than any other section. So if to take advantage of an aircraft from the Eastern Shore and say and do something in Baltimore, they don't really.
Yeah.
I don't know the city, so
Sure.
Yeah.
Makes that difficult, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we had times where we were directed to patrol basically the city for like 15 minutes or 15, 20 minutes after every time we dropped a patient off at a city hospital. So every time we left the hospital, we would do a patrol. And so that got into some weird things because, I would take off from Southern Maryland. I'd fly up there, drop a patient off, and next thing I know, I'm trying to call a chase in West Baltimore. And I don't know the streets. And it's kind of... It's such a big. We got to cover the entire state. You can't know the streets.
And there's always something going on. So it's like, what of these series of law enforcement interactions that are going on is something that
Yeah.
Hey, do you see that one? Yeah, that one's okay. How about that one over there?
Yeah.
It's like, so we're just kind of like, is there anything on fire? Is there like 15 responses to the same area? It's like.
I mean, where we can, and that's where we try to work with our allied units. So, like, where we can, we try to work to our strengths, right? There are times where you'll have both our helicopter and like Baltimore County's helicopter on the same call, and we kind of aim to our strengths, right? Sometimes we let, not let, but they do most of the law enforcement, like the real TFO searching, and we'll maybe land and shut down and be on standby on scene in case like a police officer or something like that gets injured.
Right.
Right, and we can crank right back up and depart. So I think that's a really good balance. It just comes from cross training and like knowing what the different strengths and weaknesses of the units are.
Yeah, and that again goes back to like the networking part of it, right?
Yeah.
I guess you guys work so frequently with them, you kind of have that understanding organically, but sometimes you don't have that. Like with this hurricane's a good example. You wind up in another state potentially working with agencies you rarely work with, because of a natural disaster or something that's unforeseen. And now you're in a position where you're trying to figure out, okay, what capabilities do they have and how do I integrate with them? How do I talk to them?
Yeah.
How do I talk to the folks on the ground? Like
Right.
Those are all things that the regional fly-ins, I think, help tackle, kind of going forward to where we are today at Echo. I know you've been to an Echo before in San Diego. But for you guys not having been to Echo, what's your early impression and how are you liking the week so far?
I mean, I've really enjoyed it so far. We did the Andrew and I did a canine care course with Memorial Hermann Life Flight yesterday, and that was a fantastic piece of instruction. Really good program that they have there.
That's something that's interesting. I feel like there's so many considerations that go into the care of our canine partners.
Yeah.
And I think typically we'd want to lean on the handler to care for that dog, but there's situations where the handler and the dog are shot, and the handler's now out of position to even care for the dog. So then you've got a patrolman or a flight medic who maybe doesn't have any experience in dealing with these types of injuries. What were the themes that you saw, or some things of interest that you maybe hadn't considered before taking that class?
I had a little bit of previous training on that because basically this past year we sat down with our canine unit and we're like, hey, what happens if you need to get to a vet hospital at 2:00 in the morning? Like, how do you do it? We have in the history of the state police, we've transported canines from time to time, but we've never really provided a whole lot of care. And so we took a class prior, and the big theme from both of them, and I mean, you can tell me what you took from it,
definitely.
But the big thing from both of them is pretty much like your human medicine and human instincts, particularly for the like TCCC, like the combat casualty care, the wound, like the dog that's shot. If you do what you think you should do for a person, you're probably going to be pretty close to right. There's definitely some nuances and some different landmarks, and you have to know the anatomy and things like that. But for the most part, really getting in there and using the tools that we typically have to stop bleeding and to, seal chest wounds and things like that, that's still the right answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's pretty spot on. I mean, I think you could go all the way from just your kind of battlefield medicine, like Adam said, plug the hole and stop the bleeding, make sure they're still breathing, all the way up to cricothyrotomies, intubations, advanced medications. But I think the first one is at least maybe the best option for us to get that canine. Just throw him in the helicopter, do what's right. Stop those few things and get him quickly over to the emergency vet, and have that pre-planned out with them.
Talk about canine deployment considerations, and Jack's thing is the boarding pass for the canine should be a muzzle. How does that muzzle play into a wounded dog? Do you guys talk about that in that training, or?
Yeah, we did, and we've talked about that extensively with our canine unit too, because we do want them to be muzzled. We have a good helmet camera video from when we were doing training with our canine unit of one of our canines trying to take a bite out of one of our flight medics' butt.
I guess it's funny not having been there.
Yeah, and luckily he was wearing a muzzle because he just muzzle tapped the heck out of that guy. And it's just one of those things, they're amped up, they're in an unfamiliar environment, particularly when you talk about like if they're wounded, they might be getting into a situation where they're having altered mental status. I mean, the same thing as you would, if you have me and I'm shot and I'm starting to get loopy, please take my gun belt off, right?
Yeah.
Remove the weapons from me so I don't go into fight or flight mode with an arm, with a firearm in the back of the helicopter. So same kind of thing. I mean, we need to muzzle them, but we need to kind of pick the right one. So you want to make sure that you can allow them to pant or breathe to clear their airway if they vomit. Yeah, it's definitely something that we have to consider. And then, obviously if they're very severe and we have to do a lot of things, one advantage of us being a full flight program is we have sedative medications and things like that we can give to sedate them, handle pain, things like that.
Yeah, I actually heard Herman does that training and does that, like that's part of their like a standard calls for service, how they train. I thought that was really interesting. So cool that they're out here training to that. Sorry to interrupt you there.
No, absolutely. I've flown one dog so far, and we moved one of the firearm detection canines from a local jurisdiction in Maryland, actually out of state, up to Pennsylvania. Some kid brought a gun into a school, and they were trying to find it. So, dog wasn't injured, but it was still a very positive interaction working with the canine unit and just being able to transport him there a lot quicker.
Any takeaways from that? Things that were surprised you or did not surprise you?
Thank you to our sponsor, Wysong Enterprises. Wysong Enterprises offers specialty rotorcraft completion facility, focusing on solutions and installs for customers in various industries, including EMS, law enforcement, energy utility, forestry, tourism, security, and corporate applications across major OEM platforms. Visit us at wysongusa.com.
No, the dog really wasn't hesitant. As a chocolate lab, came over to the aircraft pretty well. We were all chatting with the handler, and he actually ate a piece of medical equipment when we weren't paying attention. He took one of the little test lungs out of a bag and chewed it up. But now secured him in using the same tether that we routinely use for ourselves, and got him up there. And unfortunately, we couldn't hang around, so he had to find a ride back. But all pretty seamless.
Is that mission something you guys, as a aviation program, train for? The transportation of dogs? And
yeah. So I mean, like we're our thing is like for an emergency, anything in the state, we can move it from wherever you need it to wherever it needs to be in an hour. So it just usually takes a couple of phone calls and logistics to set up it on the beginning, but
you guys have such a big cabin in your aircraft.
Yes.
I mean, you could throw a kennel in the back of that and throw the dog in the kennel.
Yeah, we really could. I mean, when we were doing the training with our canine unit, we were taking 2 handlers and 2 dogs at a time.
Wow.
And we have the space to do that and make sure that the dogs don't get at each other.
Wow. So, it's like Step Brothers. So much room for activities.
So much room for activities, yeah. No bunk beds yet, but...
Yeah, it's coming for the triple patient transports,
I guess. We'll see. There's a triple patient bunk bed that you can put in our aircraft. But.
Wow. Yeah, wild. Well, that was kind of an unexpected turn in the conversation, but I do like those conversations surrounding canine deployments and transportation, because it's something that most people at some point in their career are going to be dealt with, a transportation mission, and how do you do that safely, you know? And how do you say no? You know, you got to know if you haven't trained for it, if the canine's not comfortable with it, you just got to say no. Any no examples from you guys as far as transport missions you've said no to?
Not that I know of. I mean, I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, Adam, you about a year ago rolled out where we work with the local guys at, the local canine programs and bringing them by the hangar and just getting that familiarization with them.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of that has happened around the state. I know that one day we transported the canine. I was at a section that I'm not normally at. And that all seems seamless. So I don't know if they had taken the time ahead of time to do that, but no negatives that I know.
Yeah, I mean, I have a little
given our partners
maybe a little bit more visibility on it, but I know we've done it. Pretty much every section of the state has brought in their local handlers and done some training with them to familiarize the dogs, just in case. And that's been really beneficial, and that also helps build those kind of bridges. So
Sure.
we know, some of our handlers in far-flung areas of the states, they didn't know that we were an option to transport their dog if it was injured, or even, if they go to their local vet and their local vet goes, "Ooh, we can't handle this."
Mm-hmm.
We've identified some of the most capable vet centers in the state, and we go, okay, well, if you need to get from way out there to way out there, it's a 30-minute flight instead of a 2-hour drive.
Yeah.
So now they know that, and that's kind of a benefit just from doing all those things.
Kurt, for you and from your perspective, any insight on canine transportation missions as a pilot?
Not that I can think of. I haven't done any with the state police, but I mean we'd get them routinely deployed. A handler would come on with a military working dog, and it seemed like it was 50-50 whether they liked the Chinook versus the Blackhawk, and they just would come on, and their handlers would keep them relatively tame.
Yeah. Okay. As long as they're tame, not away from you.
Right.
Well, again, going back to Echo, we started to walk down the path of your guys' experience. So for you, having been your first time, I know it's still early in the week. What's your early impression?
Well, like you said before, the being able to interact with local partners and see the facilities, see kind of inside chuckles of like, oh yeah, it's kind of their world is a lot like ours, or ooh, they have this different. How can we maybe integrate something like that at our program or share? And like you said, we talked before. I ran into an Army friend of mine I haven't seen in probably 17 years with New York State Police. So, aviation is a small world.
It is. Yeah, it's good in most ways, and if you're a turd, you're going to find your way out of aviation pretty quick because your name's going to be soiled pretty quick.
Yeah.
For you, being your first, what's your experience been so far?
I mean, I've really enjoyed it. It's been it's very nice to sit and get a chance to talk to other people and just kind of learn, how do you do things? How do you approach this problem? How do you approach that problem? I mean, that's been fantastic.
Yeah.
And Richmond's beautiful. I went for a run yesterday. I got to explore the town a little bit. So it was it's a nice spot.
Yeah. One thing I like that Echo does is the future flight crew program, and looking at the recruitment of flight medics, is that something you guys have leaned into as an agency as far as recruitment goes and trying to get new flight medics?
That's a great idea. I don't think we've talked to them about that.
No, I mean, so I actually talked to one of the guys about it last night, but very, very informally. Yeah, I mean, it is. We're a little bit of an odd duck, and so like I don't know how much the future flight crew thing would work for us because, you do have to go to that law enforcement role. So we get some mixes of people, but I think it would be wonderful. And we're probably the most productive unit in the state police when it comes to recruiting, right? Because we are constantly out, right? What we're trying to recruit for is specialty. Mm-hmm. And it's sometimes kind of hard to convince somebody who's comfortable from after 3 to 5 years of working someplace to then uproot everything, go through an academy, do the things that come with being a trooper.
Since we're talking about recruitment, I guess now is a good time to talk about how your guys' agency looks numbers-wise right now. Are you guys seeing the same problems that everyone else is having with retainment and recruitment of new folks?
Yeah, I mean, we've done some things to improve retention. We've increased our drop program from like 5 to 7 years, things like that. But I mean, I think, in the aviation command, I think we're sitting about like 75%, 80% staffing. I don't know. That'd be a swag, but
there's so many variables to staffing. What is optimal staffing? What is funded staffing? We're always trying to recruit. On the pilot side, the bulk of our pilots are former military or have some sort of military experience, and you could go around to any one of the 7 sections and go to pick a pilot and say, well, how much longer are you going to do this? Mm-hmm. And the answer could be, I might go tomorrow, or I might go 2 years from now. So it's very much at least on the sworn side that when they get in the retirement drop, you can say, okay, I'm X years, that person's gone in this amount of time. But as far as the pilot side, you're kind of everybody's sort of profiling somebody going, okay, well, his kids are out of the house.
Yeah.
Or this person just they've got the first grandkid and they're out in California. So, when are they just going to uproot and move out there? And so you're kind of watching and hoping that, hey, did I get this right? Because, we've made great strides in recruiting. We've become more competitive with pay. We've become more competitive with with some of the competing entities like the airlines and things like that. But so we're getting better at it and getting in a position where we're not as desperate. But we always are looking to hire people.
Yeah.
And HR for an organization, our HR is great, but there's nuances to looking for a pilot. There's nuances for looking for a paramedic or for a trooper to become a paramedic, and there's things that there's a lot of like Adam said. There's a lot of specialty that you're kind of looking for of has this person done this, and this to make them a good candidate.
Yeah, you don't produce a paramedic or a pilot overnight. It takes a long time to get both of those. So succession planning, like you brought up, is really important to work through. Okay, so-and-so is 48 years old. In 2 years, they can pull the plug and do whatever they want. So how do you take that into effect and be like, okay, we've got to have some contingency plans in place to have somebody in training so that they can replace that role if needed, and same on the medic side. So I think those are always challenges, Of course, it's not black and white because funding is an issue, right? You can't just put 5 people in the training pipeline because you may not have the funding for that. So it's difficult,
Right.
But yeah, those are the kind of things I think will only get harder as we continue in the next 10 years or so. It seems like there's a big transition phase that we're going through. And I remember when I first started in law enforcement, aviation was somewhere you'd go and nobody would ever leave.
Yeah.
It would literally take someone retiring or dying, I hate to say that, but before you could go to aviation and now with the airlines, taking a ton of folks and just all the different changes that are happening in our industry, it seems like there's a lot of movement, which is kind of wild for me, being that, in the beginning was the opposite of that. So
Yeah.
Are you seeing the same thing?
We're, like I said, a lot of our people are a lot closer to a retirement age, whether it's a retirement within the state program or just a retirement, as in all that means. Like, what, I'm done working. So it's tough to project, and I think it will change because I think those jobs, people are going, hey, we finally got a salary level where I don't want to look anywhere else. Or said differently, I can't look anywhere else because I'm not going to do as well as I'm doing right now with the little amount of work that I'm doing.
Yeah.
At a section where I'm watching television for 10 hours of the day and I go to work for 2. So I think it's trending a little bit back to somebody's got to retire to open, but it's just, like I said, projecting those retirements because everybody is, more than half of the workforce is eligible to retire, even on the sworn side.
Yeah. Wow. That's difficult. On the sworn side, it's tough too because, like you said, it's not just come in and do this one thing. It's you got to go to the academy first.
Yep.
You've also got to be qualified as a medic or whatever the thing is.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things to consider there.
Well, and we've kind of figured out and done some math and stuff like that. And it's like if we don't put like 5 medics in almost every state police academy class, we're not going to feel it immediately. But we don't see those guys for like 2-ish years once they come in. So we will feel it. It's like you can sit there and calculate out like, all right, now 3 years from now, we're going to have like a whole bunch more overtime and everybody's going to be tired.
So those medics that come in and they're out of a medic role for 2 or 3 years, are they working overtime shifts at a ambulance company, or how are they maintaining their skills?
Some of them. I mean, that's what I did. So I left Fire and EMS in 2018, and then I don't think COVID happened. I didn't get right into it. And I think about 2021, 2022, I went over to a local firehouse and worked there a couple shifts a month to, stay competent with paramedic stuff.
Yeah,
before coming back into the unit.
It's tough. It's honestly not a conversation that I think we've had on the podcast talking about that medic role and how difficult that transition is, unless you're LA County sheriffs who are hiring an officer or deputy to go to medic school paid for by the department and then sliding into that role automatically. I feel like that's tough, tough to ask them to be a medic and take a time out and then come back.
Yeah, I think we're always having a conversation of how can we support our guys on the road that are taking the time out to go through paramedic school. Can we bring them in for, a flight every other month, or can we be that middle liaison between the firehouse and their bear commander in terms of getting them, some time back. There's always going to be a lot of time that you're putting out of your own pocket, becoming a paramedic.
Right.
But if we can help them.
We've gotten some good tools over the past couple of years. Like we've gotten, like online education stuff like Foam Frat, where we have a department-wide subscription to it, so we can kick out some of that stuff to somebody who's on the road now and give them a login idea, and they could maintain their certifications and keep their head in the game a little bit, even in between traffic stops if they wanted to.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool. Looking to technology for solutions. I love that.
Yeah.
It offers a lot of unique things, and that's one of them. So we started talking a little bit about multi-agency responses, and I think about the hurricane we just had in Tennessee. There was a bunch of states that responded to help those folks, and North Carolina is the same thing. We talk about how these types of training events help the successful outcome of those. Have you guys had any multi-jurisdictional or multi-agency or even multi-state incidents that you guys have been a part of, where the training that you had been a part of or the relationships you had built through that lent to the successful outcome of one of those incidents?
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
I think not exactly an answer, but I mean, we actually just did this past year a huge series of search and rescue training exercises, culminating with a big live search and rescue exercise, basically kind of simulating kind of aiming like the very small scale simulation of the current situation in North Carolina. So like flood rescues and things like that. And so that put us hoisting and working directly with the National Guard, while we had swiftwater teams also working in the same area. And we had search managers running dogs and horses and all sorts of things, right? And all of that occurring in one spot. And the cool thing was, over the time that we were doing and planning those things, we learned a lot of lessons of things where we're like, oh, we need a better statewide air plan that really defines our roles and responsibilities. And then you do have some, everybody kind of gets to know each other through that planning process. And so now you realize, like, in not just aviation, but the emergency services, special operations world is incredibly small. So you're like, oh, it's like the same 5 dudes everywhere doing everything, sometimes wearing hats from like 3 different departments. And so, you can really get to know the people. And so then when you do have a big incident that occurs, sometimes you get like a 3 a.m. phone call and you're like, I'm not how you activate me, but they're like, yeah, but you're the guy I know.
Yeah.
And then you start working through, and it's nice to have everybody know somebody. I don't know.
The comm plans on something like that, it's got to be insane. You think about all the different tactics, things that are taking place on the ground, from searching to everything else.
Yeah.
What does that look like for you guys?
I don't know. Like we commonly get stuff like on the Chesapeake Bay. You'll get something like a jumper off the Bay Bridge where we have to go, and immediately, right from the get-go, as soon as that 911 call happens, you have, responders from multiple state agencies, because you have us, you have the MDTA police, you have the Coast Guard getting involved, so they're covering the federal side, and then that waterway splits 2 counties, so now you have fireboats coming from both sides. So I mean, one of the things that Maryland has, I think, that's pretty useful is like a Maryland TAC channel system. And so I think, with those big incidents, one of the big things that we're really trying to push is just, all right, everybody go to one central TAC channel. But that can get hard. Our radio system is currently being upgraded. The old one is pretty much only capable of talking on one channel at a time. Our dispatch channel is on one, and then we have one TAC channel. And that's not great for those multi-agency incidents, but the new system is significantly better in that respect. So we can patch and relay and do all the things that you probably should be able to do.
Yeah. Do you, on your side, on the air-to-air frequencies, have you found that to be a useful tool when you're in a jurisdiction where the folks in the back may not be able to talk to the guys on the ground super well, so you just use the air-to-air frequency to get the other ship to talk?
There's definitely a common heli frequency in the DC Baltimore area, and there's a lot of deconfliction that happens in that, and we see a lot of stuff like Adam was saying. Anything around the bay, you automatically have the Coast Guard involved, and they don't have any air assets native to Maryland. Their air assets are either in Atlantic City or in North Carolina. So if they need an air asset, they're calling us first. So there's Coast Guard, there's us, there's, like I said, there's different fire agencies. Department of Natural Resources in Maryland has a helicopter. So they'll assist, they'll do certain things. They're more of a law enforcement platform. It's an A-star, so they don't really have the capability or the personnel to do any sort of care. So we'll, depending on the mission, they have a better camera right now than ours because theirs is brand new. But ours is coming. So there's always, anything around the bay is always kind of a multi-agency in some fashion.
So you guys are essentially the first responders to anything Coast Guard related, ships in distress, those types of missions.
Yeah.
Yep. That's another complexity for your guys' training.
Yeah.
Man, that job by itself is a full-time training requirement.
Yeah. I mean, like, you think about it, like, we haven't, to my knowledge, this has never actually occurred, but theoretically, you could go to work, right? Go fly out to a cruise ship, hoist somebody off, do all the medical care that they need en route, right? Intubate them, put them on a ventilator, give them whole blood, right? Do all that stuff, and then drop them off at the hospital, come back, and at the end of your shift, be driving home in your police car and get into like a police chase, right? Because you can do everything. So it is, theoretically, like the breadth of thing, and that's the biggest thing about this job is it's not about what you do on a daily basis. It's about what you could do at any day.
Right.
And so you have to be ready to go out and do any one of your missions at any point. And that takes a lot of professionalism because, stars aligned. Like, I've done a lot of hoist training. I've yet to actually get an actual hoist mission just because I seem to be a white cloud for those things. Mm-hmm. But, I have to be just as proficient as everybody else.
Yep. You never know when that day is going to come when you're using those skill sets. I want to, Kurt, go back to you and talk about a little bit about your military experience and the deployments that you've experienced over the course of your career. You had a deployment to Iraq and Afghanistan. Is that correct?
Right. I've been to each place twice.
How did those experiences kind of shape your career and then where you are now? I mean, those are unique experiences, and what was that like?
Well, my first deployment was in 9/10, and I was a very junior pilot in command, and I had the advantage. The one thing about the reserve and the guard is generally there's a lot of older, more experienced people. In the active duty, you're generally moving up as you rank up and you move out. So at the company level, at the lowest level, you don't always have a lot of experience in the active duty company. In the reserve and the guard, there's the people that I am now, the old crusty warrant officer, that's always there and to mentor. There's a lot of mentoring, which is tremendously valuable. But I was a junior pilot in command, so I learned a lot of things that I had no idea was what I was getting into. Weather, there's extremely limited weather reporting in Iraq, and really in any deployment. So a lot of dust, a lot of unpredictable weather. One of my first instances of going, actually my only instance of going inadvertent IMC, so it flew into like a mummy-like dust cloud, poof, gone, everything's gone. So I had to shoot an emergency GPS approach. We didn't have a regular approach into the airfield, so I had to recover back into the airfield. As we came into the land, we ended up just sitting down on the runway because we're like, I don't know where we're taxiing anymore. We're just gonna ground taxi. We're not gonna fly. We're just gonna drive down the runway till I think was our spot. So that one was an eye opener for kind of learning to be the person in charge of the helicopter and kind of being the adult in the room. the good thing about the Chinook community is our crew makeup. So we in combat we fly with 3 crew members. Generally, at home we try and fly with at least 2, and that relationship with the enlisted, the flight engineers or the crew chiefs versus the pilots is to me makes the Chinook community much better than any of the others, because they're living and dying with you. You know, we're all operating as a crew, which is set me up very well for the relationship that we have with the state police, because everybody is hopefully working together. And when they're not, that's working through the crew coordination element of trying to bring everybody on board to the same page.
Yeah.
And you see a lot of that within junior people across the board of, okay, I know what you're saying, but I don't really know what you're saying. So, you find people that are very good at communicating and using, common language and things like that. And you see people that are not as good and kind of trying to bring everybody up. But then, so I switched gears to Afghanistan about a year later in 11-12, and went from the weather and the environment kind of being the biggest hazard to the terrain. I was up in Bagram, so flying around in the mountains at 10,000+ feet, and so I was flying D models, so not a digital cockpit. So a lot of kind of terrain orientation to try and find landing zones and things like that. A lot of nighttime operations, so postured me pretty well for goggle operations back at home. And so that I was kind of a mid-grade person at that point, or mid-time person. So I've spent a lot of time at nighttime, again mentoring junior people, and then went back to Afghanistan in 16-17 with the F model digital cockpit, heavily automated, the ability to just go into a zero visibility, just hover around in a dust cloud and maintain a position. So that operation or that rotation was very heavy on deliberate operations to LZs in the middle of the desert. We were down in Kandahar, so I was learning a new helicopter and learning to kind of trust the automation and a little bit. So that was a good learning experience, because the 139 is very capable. It's 4-axis autopilot. It'll hold a position. It'll shoot an approach for you. It'll do everything that you could want it to do with the automation. So it's a very good setup for that.
Yeah. Something that interests me is the conversation surrounding the training of your air crew in the automation features, like autopilot, right? In the event you're incapacitated, the pilots are not in a position to take care of the ship. Do you guys have the opportunity to train to that for the air crew in the back?
To some respects. So we fly 2 pilots for our missions, but we definitely integrate and expect the guys in the back to kind of keep us honest. So we heavily try and integrate systems knowledge, basic things like, hey, if I'm working an emergency procedure and I'm going to shut off the fuel, hey, this is the number 1 fuel valve. Does everybody agree? Or when a pre-landing check, the gear's down. Does everybody see 3 green? Okay, we're all on the same page. And that's just the landing gear specifically, because we have a lot of people that aren't from wheeled helicopters, so it's new to them.
Yeah.
And even it's not something that they're used to raising and lowering the gear.
Yeah.
Like really a handful of helicopters are retractable gear. I mean, I fly a wheeled helicopter in the Army, but it's not retractable. So
yeah, just today we're watching the ship with the wheels taxi, and it's so weird to me. It's not something I'm used to seeing, so it's really cool. But yeah, I can see how that could be problematic if it's something you're not used to.
Yeah, and we try and do very heavily. There's always opportunities to train more, and there's never enough time in the day, and especially from a kind of an organizational level, we're trying to push more, better. How do we better train crew coordination or crew resource management? How do we better train integration between, front seat and back seat? I mean, the guys in the back are inundated with training, like Adam and Andrew were saying, that they've got the paramedic qualifications. They're shooting. They're doing doing trooper related qualifications, and so their time away from the job of being a section paramedic is spent doing all kinds of different things. Plus, whatever, if opportunities arise to do extra training or work a road assignment or something like that. So their time is precious, and we don't get the opportunity to integrate much with them outside of sitting around four of us at a section where we can kind of talk and just try and get on the same page and build that family relationship.
Yeah, I think that table talk is often the best kind of training and conversation you can have, So you're not in the moment trying to be like, oh, now what do we do? It's like you've discussed it already. You've at least come up with some sort of a plan versus, well, I guess we're going to figure it out now, Is that something you guys do routinely with table talk?
Yeah, I think I can speak on the RT, coming through the initial entry training. We learned all the dual concurrence items. We worked with aircrew training as well as the section pilots to run through the QRH. I remember going, my first few days at each section that we trained at. That was one thing. We sat down with the pilots and they broke it out and, to make sure that we could run through it competently. Another thing is the currency training flights, where we go out as a crew on those and, often they'll hand the QRH back and we'll, the call and response. So I think that's great, just integrating us, front seat, back seat for any type of emergency that we can encounter.
The more brains you can put to a solution and something like that, the better, And
we have had the 139 for 10-ish years, ballpark, and we've worked out a lot of things with kind of a larger crew integration, because we went from one paramedic, one pilot to double of everything. And so we put a lot of effort was put into it, whether intentionally or whether, as a reaction, to try and make that better.
Going back to your Chinook time, you talked about how that shaped your career. Having that experience in a crewed aircraft, man, that must have come in big when you switched aircraft.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Hangar Z podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that promote the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Lastly, stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors. Cheers.
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support. Thank you to our sponsor, Robinson Helicopter Company, the choice for unrivaled safety and reliability, so you can accomplish any mission with confidence. For more than half a century, Robinson has been at the forefront of the helicopter industry. From the R-22 to the R-66 turbine, Robinson makes helicopters accessible so more people can accomplish more missions. Climb higher. For additional information, visit www.robinsonheli.com. Thank you to our sponsor, Wysong Enterprises. Wysong Enterprises offers specialty rotorcraft completion facility, focusing on solutions and installs for customers in various industries, including EMS, law enforcement, energy utility, forestry, tourism, security, and corporate applications across major OEM platforms. Visit us at wysongusa.com.
Thank you for joining us for this 2-part series on the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicast and in partnership with Vertical Valor Magazine. In this 2-part series, I had the privilege of speaking with members of the Maryland State Police at the ECHO 2024 conference in Richmond, Virginia. We explored the critical role of networking and education in public safety and explored the personal journeys of our guests into the fields of aviation and law enforcement. Throughout our discussion, we uncovered valuable insights on the responsibilities of trooper paramedics, on the challenges of maintaining proficiency in a large unit, as well as the unique considerations that come with caring for our canine companions during transport. The importance of collaboration among agencies during emergencies was a recurring theme, as was the need for continuous training and experience in the field. We focused on various aspects of public safety aviation, including canine transportation missions, the ongoing challenges of recruitment and retention, paramedic training, multi-agency responses, and experiences with DUI enforcement. Our guests drew from their rich military backgrounds, adding depth to our understanding of the complexities involved in operations with the Coast Guard and other partner agencies. We appreciate your time and hope you found this conversation as enlightening as we did. Don't forget to subscribe and tune in for our next episode, where we continue to explore the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation.